Now, I'll talk briefly about scales. Most of you already know what scales are, just a series of notes. That's just a regular major scale. Now, a lot has been said about scales and the theory behind them. So I'll talk a little bit about music theory right now, because I get asked quite often, how do you feel about music theory, knowing music theory versus playing from the heart? Which is one of the stupidest questions I can ever get asked. It's like saying if you have one, you can't have the other. You can have any of them in any degree you want. It's just based on what you want. So in the realm of developing your understanding of scales and whatnot, or music theory, the rule of thumb for me is if you're interested, nothing will stop you from understanding it. If you're uninterested, nothing will help you to retain it. So if you're not interested in music theory, don't worry about it. You don't need to know one bit of music theory to be an effective, incredible musician. But you do have to have a good ear. And one of the things I'm going to talk about after we go through the technique stuff is, as I said, the most important thing, your ear, your inner ear, your musical ear. That takes a tremendous amount of developing. Some people are born to the world with a different level of ability to hear musically, to have an inner musical ear, and you can develop it. Just like you can develop your technique, although many times it's put aside because it's hard. So when it comes to scales and theory and stuff like that, like I say, myself, I was always interested in it. I wanted to know everything about music theory. I loved music theory. I thought little black dots looked like art. And I wanted to know how to write music. I wanted to know how to, I wanted to be a master I wanted to have total command over written music, because instinctively I knew that the process of composing was infinite. And when you have 100 people at your command, just by putting a little black dot on a piece of paper and then putting an accent on it and then putting a slur or a dynamic, and knowing that they have to do everything you say and they love it, that's incredibly liberating for me. And I love composing orchestra scores. I've written many symphonies, and I just so much enjoy thinking about it, visualizing it, and then manifesting it. And then there it is, and it's being performed. Incredible. But you don't need to understand music if you don't want to, and you can still be very effective. So back to the technique. Scales. I can show you scales, I can explain scales, you can get all that information someplace else, but I'll leave it at this. Scales are colors to me. There's a technical aspect to them, there's an explanation, there's the technical academic level of a scale, such as a major scale. And I can tell you it's a major scale because of this, this, and this, etc. But what I encourage you to do when you're learning scales is the fingering is fine. Knowing the fingering is fine. And I used to practice my scales in every key, starting from every point on the guitar, going from lowest to highest note and then backwards. And if I made a mistake, I had to start everything all over again. That's what you do when you're a teenager on Long Island. So it was very useful and very helpful to me. But eventually what I liked most about scales was the color and the flavor that they were. So for instance, if I just held this a pedal E, and I was to play in the Ionian scale, major scale, this would be the major scale. That's just stuff in the major scale. But really, there's a flavor to the major scale. Whoops, that wasn't a major note. Anyway, you hear the flavor of that. And then if you're going to learn modes, besides learning the fingering and the theory behind it, memorize, invest yourself in the color of it. So let's take the Dorian mode, for instance. If you don't know what it is, go figure it out. See, it's got a feel and a sound, and then there's the Lydian mode. See, there's a particular quality to it. It's my favorite mode. And then there's synthetic modes, which you can explore. Synthetic mode is a scale that doesn't necessarily have a tempered or a conventional note count in it or note interval count, but it creates a tonality that's unique, different from conventional major scales and their modes. And they're really great to explore. But I would always recommend explore the sound, the tonality. And that's scales. You can learn them, you don't have to. I liked learning them. I liked knowing all the scales that I could, but more than that, I liked understanding the flavor of the scale. And you can, when you're practicing your scales, that's what you listen for. And that's scales.